Okay. Recorded live.
Good morning, good afternoon, or good evening, wherever you may be across the nation or around the world. Once again, you are listening to the VMware Communities Roundtable Podcast. This is podcast number 765. My name is Eric Nelson, and with me today, I have my regular co-host, Bob Plankers. Today is Wednesday, April 22nd, 2026. Bob, how you doing?
I'm doing all right. Yeah, sometimes I call it 2025 as well, and time flies, man, when you're having fun. So things are good. How are things on your end?
Things are good. Things are good. We're busy. We're getting ready to head up to Toronto to do yet another VMUG Connect. So, been analyzing what's been happening and what we got going on for the code labs and AI and that, and everybody's busy. Like the world is keeping us busy at VMware, right, and at Broadcom. So happy to be here. Happy to be doing it. So we thought we would just do a little news first. Obviously, I think registration opens next week for Explore, I think on the 28th. So be aware of that. And call for papers is closing down, I think, tomorrow. So we got another day or so for call for papers. I believe it's shutting down tomorrow. And then reg opens, I think, on the 28th. So getting excited to, run that. And the call out I'd have is that community papers community talks do come with a pass. So if you want to come to Explore, we're always looking for interesting papers, community members, people that will appeal to the community theater, as well as code talks, right? And we haven't really talked about the hackathon and what's happening with the code program, but it's still going on. We're still doing it. We will have a hackathon this year, and the code theater, some of the talks, I think we got 12 talks allocated to code topics. So, nice. Obviously automation, right? We're not really engineering. We're more automation, PowerShell, or any other thing. And on today's podcast, we'll talk about, your AI automation strategies, right? That might be something worthy to a talk on, right? If you spend a little time on building out agentic workflows to manage either your test and dev environment or whatever, those would be interesting. But the point is, those community talks, which I think we're going to have like 25 or 30 of those in the community theater, those come with a full ride pass, right?
Nice.
So that's exciting. So that's what's happening with Explore opening up. We're obviously in Vegas, August, end of August 31st to September 2nd or 3rd, something like that. So
September 3rd, yep.
Yep, as always. So that's going on. And then only other news that we have is just the Connect continue on. We've got Toronto happening in May 7th, and then Dallas, Texas later on, I think in June, right? So look for those, and if you're going to be in the region, and then Orlando in November. So that's far enough out that we don't really have to talk much about that, but excited to be there. And I believe the Toronto numbers are looking pretty good. I expect over a couple hundred people in Toronto. So, if you're going to be in the neighborhood and want to come check it out, lots of stuff going on. Most people are pretty happy with the events. So really a good community event. Excited to be there. Right.
Yeah, Minneapolis was nice. It was good to see everyone up in those parts. It was good to hang out with you, and the rest of the crew. And that, for smaller conferences, the smaller conferences are nice because you can actually have a conversation. You're not running from place to place. You can stop and talk. You can have meaningful interactions with people. Even some of the activities were pretty fun. I saw a video of the Circle of Life or something like that. I won't go into it too much, but some of the charades and things like that they were playing as part of the gathering on the second night or whatever. That was pretty cool. So. Yeah,
and I know for Toronto they made a little bit of change. The day 0 that we called them is actually going to be called day 1, and they're going to have a few more sessions going on that day.
Oh, cool.
And then they're going to have the evening event start earlier, like 4 to 6. So that way, after the evening, 4 to 6, you can go out and have dinner with your friends and hang out. And so in Minneapolis, they did it, I think it was like 5 to 7 or 5 to 8, something like that. They're moving that forward a little bit so that you have time to go out and hang out. And I know that me and you did that too. Like that
Yeah,
first Tuesday is great to go out and just, drink beers and have fun with people.
Yeah, and thanks to Intel sponsored some of that. There were gift cards to some local establishments that they handed out or whatever, and so people could go frequent those and within a couple of blocks or so. I don't know how they're going to do it in Toronto, but yeah, the VMUG folks put on a good party and put on a good show, and it's always appreciated. So big thanks.
Yeah, it is, and yeah, happy to see everybody, and then have that day. They're going to call it day 1, day 2, and day 3, or 3.3 and a half a day on the third day. So yeah, good
Cool.
times there. Look for deals. I know that they got $99 1-day deals. So if you're just going to come in for a day and want to hang out, I think Wednesday is the day that the keynote happens, and everybody's there. So the Wednesday full day is a great day if you're in town and you just want to stop by and spend a day. I think it's $99 for the
$99 for a day or whatever. So that's cool.
Yeah, that's good.
Yeah, it looks like Peter Neer, one of our field CTOs, is talking. He is a Canadian, so and it was great to talk with him in Minneapolis. He's got good things to say. And then Chris McCain helping with the keynote as well. If you haven't heard Chris talk, he's a very engaging speaker, talks about vDefend and network security and all of that stuff. He's my counterpart in the security realm. I take care of the platform, he takes care of the workload sort of thing. And yeah, he's a great speaker. So
yeah,
terrific. Yeah. But there's lots of other people too. So
yep, and come on by if you're there. Come by to the code booth. We're going to have the mini forms there, as well as smaller, lighter machines running VCF, running vCenter, running even the not automation. We have the operations console up, so that we can kind of talk through licensing. I'm going to change a little bit of the what we're talking about at the Code Lab in Toronto, just to talk a little bit about how to get through the VMUG Advantage licensing that's happening. So understand that. We're also going to make some changes to the licensing program so that if you want to get your first year home lab, we're going to be making that change. I haven't talked about that, so this is the first time I've announced it publicly, and Brad will kill me knowing that I actually mentioned it, but we are moving to the point where we're going to allow you to get your home lab set up before you have to take your VCP exam. That's going to take us about 6 months to implement. So if you kind of want to get started, the best way to get your license now is to go past your VCP, because like anything at Broadcom, when you want to do operational changes, there's work to the back end to make that happen. But we are committed to making that happen, and we're spinning up a project to do that. So that'll be nice.
You can't just tell your AI agent or whatever, change the program, make no mistakes,
I could, but yeah. Yeah, here's the deal. I think there are other licensing changes happening in the VCF product line. That those guys are pretty busy doing real engineering work and supporting the release of products. And so when we came in going, hey, we'd like to make this easy change, all we have to do is do a little bit of work. They're like, get in line.
If there's something I've learned, Eric, in my tenure thus far at VMware and now Broadcom, it's to not make assumptions about easy. I will often, when I'm talking to engineering, I will often talk about things. I'll preface things with, this seems like it should be straightforward, but I know what I'm saying. Like I know that there's all kinds of, things wrapped up on each other, even just documentation and stuff like that. And so, yeah, changing things has got lots of ripple effects outward. So, but no, that's good.
Yeah.
So the chicken and egg problem there.
But come if you're in Toronto at VMUG Connect, come by, say hello to me. You don't have to do the labs. You can chat. Tell me what you've done. I think the most interesting thing that I experienced in Minneapolis is the people coming up telling me how they used AI, right? Like, we're showing you how to run Llama on, GPUs on your home lab machines, running ESX and installing, putting an AI there and running it, then putting OpenClaw there, running it, So we have those. But the interesting thing for me was having community members come up and talk to me about what they're actually running in their own home labs, right? And some of you guys, and I say you guys, because I'll transition to the conversation I wanted to talk about to you, Bob, because we we chatted a little bit about it on 764 when we were in Minneapolis around agentic automation as an administrator. But I thought it would be interesting just to spend a little time because various people came up to me going, yeah, I'm actually transitioning to agentic kind of management, right, in my role of and managing my IT environment, that you can use agentic orchestrators now to control your environment and have it do work. And one of the guys that came up, I was super impressed with, was a guy named Bob Plankers, right? Because Bob came up and he's telling me all the things that he's using an agentic orchestrators for, and I thought it'd be interesting to spend a little time talking about that.
Yeah.
So the first thing, Bob, I'll ask you, like, could you take us through, like, what is an agentic? When people talk about agentic, and maybe not everybody listening to this is that familiar with agentic. So we all know ChatGPT, we all that, but tell me a little bit about the agentic layer that layers on top of your LLMs.
Sure. Well, we've got these models, these large language models, and it turns out that there's different modes that they operate in, like just like you and I can have a chat, but then you and I could go build something too, like we could actually go use tools and go change the world around us. I mean, a computer program changing the world is very Tron-like, like whatever, but you get my point, that it's this thing that exists out there. And these agents that work on your behalf, like whether they're backed with a model of some sort, a large language model, but they're doing things, and maybe they're just sitting there, watching a directory, and then they've got instructions on what to do if they see something show up in the directory. Or maybe it's like OpenClaw, the OpenClaw stuff that made a lot of news a couple months ago or whatever, and earned the ire of the Anthropic folks. But maybe you've got it wired your agent up to different things. Maybe you've given it access to be able to make phone calls so it can call a restaurant and make a reservation for you or whatever. But it's something that's out there that's doing something for you, or supposed to at least. It's been given a set of instructions, and people think of these things as assistants in many ways, and the sort of assistance you get can vary. It's nebulous. But that's kind of the idea behind the agentic stuff.
So the best way that I've kind of been dreaming about it now that what do I want to do with this, right? I have several Alexas that control my lights, right? And there is an API that allows you to talk to the Alexa and do that. And so having an orchestrator that would sit and look at my GPS location, right? Because then maybe he can figure out where I'm at and know that when I'm coming home, the orchestrator can say, oh yeah, Eric's coming home. Maybe I should just turn on some lights, right? Or I should,
based on this sensor, this motion sensor went off. That's probably Eric coming home, and I bet he wants to be able to see where he's going.
Right. And so that guy sits and watches things and watches all the data. And so the agentic agents are connected to various feeds, right? And one of the feeds might be my GPS location. And if it can figure out my GPS location through an agentic interface, then it can do stuff with my home automation, right?
Yeah, but I mean, an if-then statement can do a lot of that stuff too, and that's what's been doing that sort of. If motion sensor A triggers, then turn on the lights, or turn on this subset of lights, or that sort of thing. And so the idea is that, that there's more thinking behind it too. Like, what if you wired it up to a camera, so it's not just a motion sensor, but it can tell who's there. Hey, that's Eric, and he's carrying groceries. I'm going to unlock the door for him, but hey, wait a second, that's a dog, and we don't have a dog in this house. I'm not unlocking anything, in fact, I'm going to play this high-pitched sound to maybe get the dog out of the garage where it's not supposed to be, that's some interesting stuff. Or thinking about the problem a little bit.
Right. And so this orchestrator or agentic butler or whatever I want to call my sidekick, my AI Tron, right, is then maybe we should call it the master control guy, right?
See, MCP, the master control program, that's already got model context protocol. Those folks apparently had not watched Tron when they named that thing. So, and we can get into MCP servers.
Yeah, that's true. Don't confuse MCP with MCP from Tron, right? But nonetheless, that agentic, orchestrator can then be running, and then not only but just the simple example is home automation, but then we get into other things that you can do, like write some code, right? Build me a website, and then pay attention to what's happening on that website, and generate a new feature for my website, and then test it, and then deploy it, and give me status reports on how my sales is doing off my website, and then modification, an ad, because they talk to Twitter or LinkedIn, and you can allocate a budget to them, and then they can look at the traffic on your website, and they do A/B testing. It gets crazy, right?
Yeah, it can be, but it's also they're junior staff members. It's been my experience that so you set one of these things up and you give it a task, and the attention span isn't great, and it loses things, like basically when between instances where it runs, you have to prompt it again,
Right.
So it's either running all the time and then it eats context, basically.
All right. So we're transitioning into what I want to interview. So set this as a stage of agentic. Now everybody understands what we're talking about. Now I'll ask you the classic question of, so Bob, tell me what you've done with your agentic, and then we'll get into the problems that you see, or whatever. So why don't you outline kind of how you got involved with implementing this yourself?
Well, as I like to think of myself as kind of a nerd, and so nerds have kind of gravitated towards these things. I've been playing with chatbots for a long time. I tried training a chatbot a long time ago on my email and stuff like that, and the results were disastrous. But and so playing with this stuff, it's really interesting. And then the breakthroughs with transformers and the transformer models and stuff like that, not the toys or whatever, but the science behind it, the computer science behind it, and so you start messing with this stuff, and you can run some of it locally, as you and I have been doing, like in messing around in labs and things. And then the frontier models, the state-of-the-art models, the Claude Opuses and Sonnets, and GPT, I think 5.4 now, and all of the Groks and Grok 4.3 that's currently in development, and all of that stuff, and seeing the capabilities rise there, and the ability for them to solve problems and do tasks, and larger context. I was starting to talk about context. There is the kind of the window of, like, it's like the active memory of what you're doing with the model right now, and that's the context. And and so those grow. Those used to be pretty small, so you could only do really limited things with it, but now those have grown. Like the Anthropic models have 1 million token context, and so you can hold a lot of information in its active memory and work with it. And so that's pretty cool. And and so you get thinking, what problems can these things solve? What problems, in OpenClaw. I think the OpenClaw, the ClaudeBot revolution, as it were, kind of opened a lot of people's eyes to the idea of these agents and what they can do. And I still don't have a ClaudeBot. I've still actually never deployed one, and I've been thinking about it. It definitely sold a lot of Mac Minis to run these Claude.
So I was watching a YouTuber talk about the adoption of AI in different phases. Back in 2023, it was chat, right? And it was just an interaction. A lot of us are there, right? Then came Claude with coding, right? Where, you have the coding, and I forget what they call it, open code.
Vibe coding.
Vibe coding, right? Yeah. And where it would, you would engage with it, and then it would code for you, right? And then it would code and kind of deploy your code for testing.
Well,
right?
it can, and that's, and that's a really interesting thing. So all of this stuff, all this vibe coding, like, what if you could just tell it what you want instead of, it's the same thing that we've been doing with programmers all these years, like your organization as a systems programmer or whatever. Hey, it would be really great if I had a tool that did X. And then 3 months later, they'd, assemble whatever, write something in Perl or PHP or some combination of everything. And then, hey, now I've got a tool to, search the logs from all of my systems or whatever. But, what if I could just kind of describe that to these models now that they know how to code? And this was a realization a lot of people made, that these things were trained on languages. Like, hey, can you just whip me up a PHP script or a PHP little app that, lets people sign up for my newsletter, that sort of thing.
Right.
And holy crap, it did it. My goodness, did it care about security? Well, that's a different topic. Did it follow best practices? Did it, nah, maybe not, but you got some output out of it, and the promise is there. But and so then it just followed from that. Well, what if I could point it at a bunch of Linux boxes I have and just say, hey, you're the sysadmin now, take care of these
now,
boxes,
who are you using? What agentic capability are you using? Claude, or are you using, what are you using to connect to your Linux boxes?
On a personal level, I've messed around a lot with Claude Code. I like the CLIs, basically. Claude Code and the Codex functionality in the ChatGPT side of the world, OpenAI side of the world. And Codex is I think better at coding right now than, but it's an arms race or whatever.
Right, sure.
Like the one gets better at certain things, and the Anthropic folks seem to be going towards a more multifunctional thing. They've got desktop applications that'll
I was in listening to this, they were taking us through the battle between OpenAI and Claude's coming out with something desktop, like a whole, I don't know what it's called. Like Anthropic is building the Claude desktop, open desktop.
Yeah, it's Claude Cowork, I think is what it's called, or whatever.
Some name like that.
And it's all right, I just like the CLI. Like, hey Claude, you install it. It just runs in PowerShell on my Windows box here, and I can just do, I can tell it if I want to edit Word documents. I really like the CLIs, and I do this with Codex as well. Like I've got Python installed, and I just tell it, hey, you've got Python installed. You've got all these modules installed that can interact with PowerPoints and Excel spreadsheets and databases and all of this stuff. Have at it, and or a Linux box. You can install it there if you want to develop a PHP application right there, and then but I mean it'll do it. It'll do what you want. It's pretty narrow sometimes. It's pretty literal in many cases, and that's the peril of some of this agentic stuff, is that you still really need a human in the loop. And
sure.
Yeah, to kind of like my kids. I keep likening these things to my kids. My kids are autonomous beings, and they can go off and do stuff. But once in a while, you got to ask, was that a good idea, or what did you learn from this? And it's the same with the AIs.
Yeah, I got a buddy, Marius Katorsha. He used to work at VMware. He helped me start the code program originally. So
cool.
Some of the people might be listening remember Marius. Great guy. Went to work at IBM. Runs IBM's community. Then he left. Now he works at Higher Logic as their community CIO or CTO community focused on AI. And I was at his house, and he's moved into like setting up a server. He runs Paperclip, right? Which is, you define a company structure. You define a CEO, a CMO.
Yeah,
and
I've seen that.
A bunch of different roles, right? And they got sample roles where, various companies. So if you're a marketing company or an ad agency company or whatever you are, you're an IT company, consultants, they have different roles and different whole company infrastructures with different agents or people that are your staff that then all work together to accomplish your tasks of what you're trying to accomplish. So really interesting, all GUI based, right? Versus versus command line. But then you set up your company, you copy somebody else's company, and then you give it tasks, and you give it like what are your goals and objectives for your company, right? And then it fires off your employees, which are all robots, right, to go implement and develop, and then gives you dashboard of tasks, where they're stuck, where they're not, what input they need, and you just come in. And he runs that. He hosts it on a Mac Mini, so this is stuff that's all open source. Paperclip is open source. You download it, much like OpenClaw. It's a GUI competitor to OpenClaw, but and you look at it and you're, wow. He's like, yeah. And I have another guy that I'm very familiar with, and I'm not allowed to use his name, but he runs same kind of thing, and he's giving it all kinds of stuff. and it produces content for them. It produces, and I was talking to you a little bit about how you have some AIs doing various things, various tasks that not just building code and PowerShell, but other activities that then give you reports and gives you work that you can do. And I'm looking at that, going, oh my gosh, if you're a modern IT administrator now, maybe you need to spend a little bit of time setting up your home lab, getting this all running.
And understanding how this is going to change your world is what this amounts to, and so one of the things I was telling you about in my agentic journey here or whatever, and Paperclip, I had forgotten about Paperclip. This is actually really cool, and I think about stuff like Paperclip so I'm the secretary of the board for a nonprofit organization here in Southern Wisconsin. And there's a lot of stuff going on, there's a lot of things. We're getting emails and, questions about, when are the facilities open and what are the rules and all of the stuff, and it's just having a human deal with this stuff and membership and all that stuff, and having a little company of these agents, and especially if the agents can talk to each other, because the model,
they talk to each other. Yeah. Mm-hmm.
Well, they have different ideas too,
right.
And that's actually one of the interesting things that I've done for a while here is, asking a bunch of different models the same question, or having one model, critique my writing, for example, and then asking the other models, what they think, and then telling the one model, like, I just pick a model that is sort of my main model, and I tell it, well, hey, this other model was talking trash about you over here, and this is what it said, like, it's got some criticism, and then seeing the back and forth. And what if that back and forth wasn't just me cutting and pasting? But what if it was just happening on the back end and they just came to a consensus about what the answer should be? And that's what I see Paperclip doing. But where I was going with some of this is my own journey, I've been using configuration management tools for sysadmin sorts of things for many years. I mean, a long time ago, there was something called CF Engine, which was a little complicated to use. And it had these ideas of promises and all of this stuff. And it was fine, whatever. It was a little clunky, but then came along this thing called Puppet, and Puppet was really interesting. And I think VMware was even one of the investors in Puppet back in the day. And, to centralize this stuff and do it in Ruby, the language Ruby had come out. And so write it in Ruby. Ruby's a lot easier to interact with for humans, and that. And so I did a lot of stuff with Puppet over the years, but Puppet, I got to a point recently where, like, my Puppet installation was just kind of decrepit and old and needed to be modernized. We've got Enterprise Linux 10 variants out there. I want to run Rocky Linux 10, for example, and some of the new Ubuntus, and all my stuff was set up for old Ubuntus and old Linuxes and stuff like that.
Are you running this all on VMs, by the way?
All VMs, yeah.
Okay,
just,
all right.
Yeah, just in my own home lab environment. Everything you were talking about earlier or whatever, I've got running here as well. My own home lab and VMUG Advantage stuff. And I passed the exam too by, I think, a question, And so the Kubernetes, I'm not really a Kubernetes guy, and that really hammered me. But that aside, so I just thought, just on a whim, I deployed a whole bunch of Linux VMs and said, hey, here's my old Puppet repository. Can you make this happen? And I gave it the framework. And you got to define these things. When you're talking, you can't just tell it. You can just tell it to go do something, but you're not going to be happy. You're going to be like, oh, it's an idiot, like it just did the wrong thing. But it's the same as, again, having kids or if you manage a team or something like that, you got to give people clear instructions. You got to give these AIs clear instructions. This is what I want to see as an outcome,
Right.
And you got to, with configuration management, for example, I said, it's got to be idempotent. It's got, when this stuff runs, it's got to have the same results every time. And the AIs, the models, know that they are non-deterministic, that you can ask them the same question 5 times and you will get 5 variations of the same answer, and that's not okay in the sysadmin world, and so but just you ask it. You say, hey, you're not going to come up with the same answer all the time. How do we solve this? And it will propose it to you. Here's how it solves it. In my case, it wrote a whole pile of shell scripts, and it numbered them. I think we're up to like 35 now, and there's some like 1 A's and 1 B's and 1 C's and stuff like that. But and it was just an experiment. Basically, I gave it. I don't know. I think I gave it like 10 VMs, 10 little Linux VMs or whatever, varying types, varying distributions, varying versions, and it figured it out. Did it make mistakes? Absolutely. And do you need to give it a test environment? Yeah, I gave it a test environment. I gave it SSH and root access to the test environment so that I could actually do stuff. There's been a couple of times where in the test environment, it has asked me, it was sitting there waiting for me when I came back, and it's like, even seemed embarrassed. It's like, I can't get the change I just made. I can't get back to these hosts. Can you log into the console and like reboot them or, fix the firewall on it? And it's just a junior sysadmin, and so, but it's really wild. And so when I want to do stuff like, I just have it prototype what I want it to do. And then it can deploy it. I have a document what it's doing, and that's another thing sysadmins always have hated to do is documentation, and so I have a document what it's doing, and then set it up in a repeatable format, and so it should be interesting moving forward. I've got personal projects, like I said, the stuff that I do for this nonprofit involves a couple of machines. And I'm starting to think about, maybe having it take a look at those boxes too, instead of it's a much better sysadmin on a regular basis than I am at this point. And so, can it help me with that? Yeah, but I still want to be in the loop, and so I tell it before you make changes, tell me what you're going to do and propose what you're going to do. I want to see it, but yeah, I mean, even recently I've told it, hey, is there a way to classify security updates? Security updates or updates to a machine, they're not all the same. Some are really important and some are not, and can you make a determination? So I've got it running on a schedule in the mornings and afternoons. Basically it kicks off and it'll make a determination whether, hey, there's a security update and it's urgent and we should do something about this soon. And here's what I propose, or we can let it wait till the normal patching process.
Are they like, do you tell it to read the RSS feeds of a given security? Like I know there's a security blog that does RSS feeds you could go consume.
You can, you can, but in this case, most Linux distributions, when they publish their updates, it actually comes with CVE information and vulnerability information. And then I've actually asked it to go out and when it gets those CVEs, to go out and look up the CVEs on the National Vulnerability Database, the NVD, and to see if there's any more information. The NVD, actually, this is news. The NVD has decided recently that because of the number of vulnerabilities coming in and the number of small ones, it's just crushing that they aren't gonna they did this process where they were basically enriching or enhancing the vulnerabilities to have more context, and they just can't keep up anymore. And so they're only doing it for the really important ones and the ones that affect the U.S. federal government, but still there's still information there. And so I have it go out there, read the NVD database, and see if it can figure out what the criticality of it is. And it came back to me like it knows I've got a demo web server, basically vibe coding a membership management app for my nonprofit, in fact, and it's like, hey, you've got PHP installed, you've got all this stuff, and there's a vulnerability, but it's only medium, but those can be chained together to be a bigger vulnerability than it looks like, maybe, and this is a dev box anyhow. Should I just patch it? And I'm like, yep, go for it,
Yeah, I feel like there needs to be like a holodeck with a bunch of AI stuff embedded in it so that you could like go get your home lab and get all this set up in a structure that would allow you to, jumpstart where you were going, right? Like, because I feel like this is a really cool thing for someone to do for your home lab, to get experience with it and get it connected to a bunch of VMs and discover what AI will do for you as an administrator, right? But at the same time, there's a amount of time to set all this stuff up and get it running.
Yeah, well, again, you can ask it to do a lot of that work. You just have to have an idea of what you want to start with. One.
No, there's configuration, right? Like a lot of guys never installed a LLM before, right? You know, and all you got to do is download the VM, set it up, and then
I'm just
run
having
this command, and 2 commands later, you're up with a LLM.
Dude, I've just got Claude Code doing this. It's got SSH access into the boxes, and I've just got Claude Code doing it.
Now, do you run Claude Code locally though, right, on a VM, right?
Claude Code is just the interface for it or whatever. It's for my personal projects and stuff like that. I use the
web-based, the cloud-based.
Well, I use the actual frontier models or whatever. I've got a subscription to Claude.
Yeah, subscription. So then you give your Claude access to your machines, right? You say, okay.
Well, I give it. Yeah. Well, and that's the thing. This is no different than any giving access. In my opinion, it's no different than giving access to another human being. They're non-deterministic too. It doesn't absolve you of needing. You still need backup stuff. The number of times it's done things where it's I've had to restore from backup. I check like all of the sysadmin stuff that it's doing. I check into Git, and I have that so I've got a history there, and it actually knows how to revert things and that. So if it screws up, it can go back and get a copy of what it screwed up or whatever. And so but also keeping all my important stuff. I keep backups, and that I've got a backup system built for the important stuff. Again, my nonprofit's website, for example, should I turn this thing loose on it? And the day might come where we do that, and we need to talk about that as a group or whatever. But, if we can have some agentic help, answering the email or whatever,
right.
But we just need to build trust. And the other thing too is as I go. So Claude, for example, has got this concept of there's a markdown file that it can read called claude.md. And if you put one in the directory that you're operating in, you can store instructions and context and that. So it's got some idea of what it's doing when it starts up again. And I tell it all the time, like, what do we need to update claude.md for what we've just learned here? This new thing that we just built, or this new change that we made. Do we need to update claude.md for it or whatever? And we should probably make a note or whatever. And so, and so it keeps track of that, and so that's how it keeps state. And you can give it instructions that way and things. But it just takes a little bit of rigor, and you just need to. There's a learning curve to it. People that try to jump in too fast to it and try to give it too much responsibility. Again, it's just like having a junior. You just hired somebody, and you got to teach them a little bit. They got to learn the ways of your system. They've got to learn how to work with you and all that stuff. And this is no different. So
I think this is a perfect thing for your home lab environment, right? Because if you really look at, we were talking yesterday about VCF9, and does home lab actually make sense anymore given the level of VCF9 and you're learning?
I think it makes a ton of sense, you know, like especially for stuff like this,
right? Like this, where you're not going to do this at work, right? You're not going to play.
I mean work. Right? Like I would never expose the stuff I do at work to this stuff, and but being. It also helps me be ahead of where work is going. Work's going to end up
that's
there
what,
too.
That's what home lab was always about, was having the ability to break things and learn and stay ahead of the curve, right? So that when it comes to work, you can make solid recommendations. But we were like, okay, now VCF9's here, you're getting certified, is there a reason to have home lab anymore if you've gotten certified and you've learned and now you're doing it all at work? And the answer is, learning this stuff on AI and being able to push the envelope of what automation is. And it used to be we'd do code labs going like, okay, here's how PowerShell works, and Fear the Beard guy would come and give us a great PowerShell tutorial on X and Y and Z. And I forget his name, right? But who was Fear the Beard? I forget his name already. But great guy. Now I look at it and I go, like home lab and coding, nobody codes anymore. Your AI is coding, but you still need to be able to set this stuff up, get it home, because you're not going to do this in your production environment, anywhere near your production environment, while you're learning the ins and outs of how to do this. Right.
Yeah. Well, I mean, the vibe coding aspect too, like, we do have at work, we do have access to certain AI tools, and I've asked them like, hey, write me a Python script. I need to synchronize this well, this VCF repository with this directory over here, so I can practice installing VCF, for example. And I don't want to download the whole thing. There's a bunch of stuff I'm not interested in. I just want the base thing, and I vibe coded myself up. Well, a Python, like I do often wonder when I say I vibe coded my, I had the AI give me a script like, hey, can you give me a script to do this? And out comes Python that does this stuff. Like, hey, here's a XML file or the JSON file you need to be able to read. And it's like, oh, here's the things that you're interested in, and it just figures it out. And then when I get an error, I say, hey, I'm getting the error. It's like, oh, it's probably because of X. I'm not checking my work very well here, and so
I got another question for you because I'm just listening to this. So like any thoughts about connecting it to GitHub, and then as it's writing things, eventually checking stuff into a shared GitHub repository, or does it know where to put these things in your production environment or your test dev environment, so all your scripts are in a place that's managed, right?
Yeah. So, tools like Cursor and stuff like that are part of your development environment and are just integrated in there. So it'll just be part of that, and it's largely human driven there. You can tell Claude Code and Codex and stuff like that there's a Git repo that what you're working on.
Here's your credentials,
and it can check stuff in. In fact, I've seen complaints on Twitter, for example, or X or whatever we're calling it. On X, people complaining that Claude it was taking credit for the work. And I'm thinking to myself, well, Claude did do the work, like it's putting in the comments like, yeah, Claude Code did X or whatever, and I think it's just people that want to seem like it's more their skill, but there's a peril in that too. Don't overinflate your own skills, but these tools are helpers, and the ability to manage them and to direct them and I really think they're force multipliers for people who know what they're doing, or maybe you don't know what they're doing and want to start out, but know what they're doing in a certain topic area. Like I like to think I know what I'm doing with vSphere and to some extent VCF. I'm still kind of new at VCF at times, and I'd say, hey, I want to automate X. I know what I'm doing, but I don't want to sit and write this thing. I want an outcome. I want a result. And it just skips me to the result, and do I try it in a test capacity first? Yeah. Anything that it's automating, I want to make sure that it doesn't roast my environment or delete something first or whatever. But, there's a lot of stuff, like a lot of vibe coded little scripts and that, that just people making their own lives easier later.
All right. I got to ask you time management here, right? Like, as some of us look and go, oh my gosh, I'm already busy. I work all week, maybe get some evening time. Maybe I got a Saturday to do some fun project stuff. Like, how do you slice out some time to do this? When is your time allocation?
Well, with the tools I have accessible to me,
because you have family as well. You're not like some.
I do, and
you have a lot of things.
Yeah, and I sometimes find myself, the stuff is super interesting to me, and so it's not that I've gotten any less busy. I just have filled my time with more stuff, and that's actually kind of the direction I've been thinking about this in lately. Is that, I think for a lot of people, it's not gonna save them time necessarily, but it will make them more effective. And at least for sysadmins, we've always had this idea of, this joke, in my copious spare time, I will get to that.
Right.
Whatever,
Right.
Well, you might actually have some, and you might actually have a helper that can actually get to some of the stuff, and that's actually what I'm most excited about, is that it's not that you're going to be, are you going to work 20 hours a week instead of 40 in a job or whatever? Probably not. You're probably still going to put in your full work week, but are you going to be more productive? Are you going to get all of this stuff done? Are you going to get your security audits done that you've been meaning to do for a while? All that stuff.
So with a little investment, maybe you grab 8 hours back of your work week that you could then use for, AI automation.
Yeah. Well, and like any tool, you're going to have to spend something up front as far as time goes to get it back and get the investment back later, so you're going to spend some time getting familiar with these things. And again, test environment, super helpful. running these things in a controlled environment, very helpful. Making sure that you've got backups and that, and then just gaining familiarity with it. Like hey, and just start solving a problem. What itch do you have that needs scratching? That's needed scratching for a long time. Maybe it's a little shell script that you want to deploy to all your hosts to do something. Maybe it's a Power CLI script that you want to go change. You need to go audit all of your ESX hosts to see if a certain parameter is set. Whatever, find a concrete thing and try it out. See how that works, and you'll build knowledge that way. You'll build confidence in. It's like anything else. You'll build confidence as you start using it, and then you'll start seeing, how can I use this more and more, that sort of thing. And so
yeah. The reason I step back a little bit is I look and I realize that most of the IT guys that were in Minneapolis, they were my age. They're like, or your age, my age, 50 to, you're a little younger than that, but like 50 to 65, 70 was the range of IT guys. Most of these guys have been working with VMware for 15 years.
Yeah.
And they started when they were 35 and now they're 50, right? And it's like to some degree, you're looking at the backside going, how am I keeping up with everything? How am I going to be relevant as an aging IT guy, right? And I think this is an opportunity for everybody. This is an opportunity to like get a home lab, get in front of not only VCF and that, but the AI that allows you to administer a large number of machines, right?
Yeah. Well, and staying relevant in this way is actually not deeply technical. Staying relevant, the thing that the AI is missing is all of the experience that we've got. The number of times I've told it that I want to do something in a particular way, and then I actually just find myself explaining myself to it, because that's just the way I am. And and it's like, oh, that's a really good idea, and it does it my way or whatever. Like there's certain ways I want things done based on 30 years of attempting to run systems like this,
Right.
And it's just.
And then the other interesting thing is it does learn who you are, right? It does. If you're on a thread and you're working with them, I've been promoting my partner's concert. I tweeted out a couple of times, and we're doing a show up in San Francisco, and it did all the graphics for us. It did the band photo. I took some photos and then gave him the photos of the band members, and it created a whole thing. It created the song list and put it in a beautiful and then it creates advertising. It gave me here's where to go at in the San Francisco area, Bay Area, and it gives you all of this stuff. And it knows who I am, and it knows that we've been working on this for a month or two. And so it gets smarter and smarter and the workflow of what I'm trying to accomplish, right? And then gives recommendations and starts looking at where else we can, and you realize that with an orchestrator, it's powerful and it doesn't take any time, right? I used to think Photoshop used to spend all day Photoshopping one image. Now it just makes like 30 images for the whole ad campaign. Boom, right there.
Yeah. Well, and you just kind of have to know what you want. And sometimes you have to just figure out how to prompt it, how to describe what you want, especially with graphics. But
it remembers what I was talking about yesterday and the day before yesterday and what we did a week ago or 2 weeks ago. So it gets smarter in what it's recommending. So you don't have to describe as much.
Yeah. And if you're doing stuff with the CLIs, like the Claude Code or Codex CLIs or whatever's out there, like there's a whole bunch of stuff. Open Code is a really interesting tool as well as a CLI. It reminds me of my old BBS days. In fact, a lot of this text-based stuff. Just have it write down, ask it. You can ask it questions. It's the coworker you can never annoy with questions. And so ask it questions like, how do I get you to remember all of what we've done the next time we restart here? Like, and it'll tell you, like, oh, just write Claude.md, like, would you like me to do that right now? Yes, please. And whatever the equivalent is on the other systems too, they've all got some form of memory at this point.
It's exciting. It makes it worth wanting to spend more time in my life doing more of this, right? Because after a while you're like, what am I doing next, right? Like, all right, you've got vSAN under your belt, you got NSX, you understand networking now, you understand setting up VMs and running VMs and all that. But now this takes everything to a whole new level, right? Of interesting stuff. So we are coming up. We've been streaming for about 49 minutes now. So congrats, Bob.
I got to get running here.
Great guest. I always ask, like, what are you excited about? Where do you think what makes you excited for the next year of AI administration? Or being an IT administrator with AI. What gets you excited?
I'm always excited. Well, by now you know that the stuff does excite me. Like I think just the general improvement in capabilities. The general knowledge. There's some fear mongering out there or whatever. I think this is a real reality for us moving forward that people are going to have to accept. That on a long time frame, AI is going to be part of our lives. And exactly what that looks like, we don't know. But I'm kind of an optimist, and so I'm hoping that, like I said, like it can help us get the things that we've always wanted to do done. But we just haven't had time. Help us communicate better. Even
Right.
just taking an email and running it through like Gemini or something. Hey, tell me what's wrong with my email here. Like, oh, you've got commas in the wrong place and you sound like a jerk. Like that sort of thing. Gemini is kind of brutal in that regard, but I think it can help with a lot of that stuff, and I think we can all learn from it. So I'm just excited about the progression. As these models get smaller, and I can maybe run one on my desk moving forward, the open source stuff.
Yeah.
That's what I'm looking for.
I'm excited next year about just the learning opportunities that it lets you, get your head around, right? Like you always run out of time, right? I always remember going to a big university, from a small university to a big university, and all of a sudden you just didn't have time to learn everything that's out there, right? You're time constrained, and being able to carve back, another 8 hours of my life, and then being able to teach me a bunch of new stuff, right? Like I'm always looking to learn new stuff. So for me, I'm excited about that the ever increasing ability for me to know more stuff, right?
Yeah.
Which is
Even just dip your toe in it. We were driving, the kids and I were driving back and forth to Iowa this weekend, and and we ended up asking it to read us trivia, asking Claude to read us trivia. Just for something to do in the car for a little while, and it was kind of fun. So
and the reason I ended up in community was the original BBSs of the day, right? I ran a BBS in the 80s, right, with modems and 1200 baud modems, and then 2400 bars, then 9600, and it was all about sharing and learning, right? Because you could get stuff from people, right, and they could share what they've learned, right? And it wasn't like and so this takes that to a whole new level because an AI has learned everything, and then they're just here teaching you things and helping you do things. And agentic means that it can actually do things that I learned, or check it into GitHub.
It can help
share
you
with
it.
other
It can
people. Yep.
Call tools and do things.
So
just got to keep your eye on it.
That's worth everybody spending some time, spin up some VMs, and I want to say go get a holodeck from Bob or something that has all this pre-built in it, so I can just go play with it. But you got it. It's literally, when we're doing it at the Code Labs in Minneapolis, and you do it in Toronto, it's just command lines. You run a couple of, I think there were 3 command lines to have the LLMs up and running, and another couple command lines to get OpenClaw up and running, right, on the connected to my LLM. So not a lot of work. I think in a day, if you got a home lab set up, with a couple of VMs, a couple of Linuxes, you can be up and running, in a couple hours.
Yeah, it's pretty straightforward nowadays. So it's exciting. Cool. So, hey, thanks for having me on. Thanks for having me on. Actually, I do appreciate doing
thanks
this
for being a co-host and a guest and everything at once. It's great. Barbecue wise, I got a birthday coming up, and we're gonna do ribs. I'm finally gonna go for large scale ribs again, not burn them. I'm gonna make like 8 racks. I'm gonna smoke them. I'm gonna do the whole thing. Because hey, you only get a birthday once a year, so why not? Right?
Yeah.
You gotta invite some people over and smoke some ribs.
Sitting about 20 feet that way right now in the middle of my garage is is a new Rectech smoker / grill. It's one of their high temperature grills. So I really missed my grill, and so it's a pellet grill and smoker. So I'm going to put that together in the next couple of days, and it just got dropped off.
Yeah, I'm telling you, you looking outside and all the leaves turning green. We're coming in April, May, June, July. Favorite time I've loved. And we also, me and my son signed up to do a chili booth over
Oh,
July
nice.
4th. So we're gonna and that's one of those things where you get up at 4 a.m. and you make giant
Yeah.
pots of chili. So it is the season, and we're coming into my favorite time of year, other than Christmas, like where you can do some barbecue and have a lot of fun in the summer. So looking forward to it.
Sounds good, man.
All right.
Well, thanks.
Hey, if you got this far, don't forget on youtube.com/VBarbecue, VBARBECUE. Give us a like and a follow. We're trying to get over 1,000 followers. Woohoo!
Yeah.
All right. Till then, go get some barbecue and enjoy.